Today's command comes from Matthew chapter 5, verse 48. Be perfect. What a tall order. This is a big statement that Jesus makes, giving to his disciples, and it is a summative statement. See, Jesus had just been teaching all of his disciples there on the Sermon on the Mount and giving them commands on how they need to fulfill God's law. They need to worry about anger, lust, divorce, oaths, retaliation, and loving one's enemies. These were all important factors in fulfilling God's law and obeying it. Then at the end of all of that, Jesus gives this condensed version in Matthew 5:48. Let's read it. You therefore must be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. If that command doesn't make you feel a little tense, then I don't know what will, because that sounds like the tallest order I've ever heard in my life. Now, what's interesting about this command is not just the size of it and the sheer magnitude of being perfect, but the contrast that Luke gives it in Luke 6. His reads, be merciful instead of perfect. Now, that might seem like this really big difference, but I want you to pause and remember words are important in place of their context. So what Luke's account says is different, but not much different. So let's dig in and look about why that is. The emphasis on mercy in Luke's account, Matthew's interest, on the other hand, is in line with God's perfect righteousness. Both convey the same idea in their command, that we need to follow God's example to the best of our ability. Perfection sounds like a scary word when we're reading in Matthew 5. When we think perfection, we think without flaw or error, while in this context, that's not really exactly what it means. It gets more to the idea of being mature and complete. Thus is alleviating to the idea that we need to work towards completeness and maturing to aligning ourselves with God's character. While sinless perfection is impossible, godliness in its biblical definition is completely attainable. Not easy, but attainable. Back to Luke's account. Mercy is getting to this idea that people are in a miserable state, or can be in a miserable state, and need help, need support from those that are able around them. Even if they're going through a difficulty, mercy is getting this idea that we need to help people. Often we look at issues and assume somebody else is going to fix that problem. I can't do it. That's somebody else's responsibility. Where God's approach to that is saying, come to me and I'll help you no matter what your problem is, no matter what your condition is. I'm here, open arms, ready to take you in. Luke, when he is giving this command, is saying, follow that image. As God is merciful, you be merciful. Our boy Paul, who wrote a good chunk of the New Testament, would echo this same idea. I love it in 2 Timothy chapter 2, one of my favorite chapters. He gives this illustration of how one does not receive the prize unless competing according to the rules. So in order to rightly wear the prize of salvation we have been given, that is salvation through faith in Jesus Christ, we need to act in a manner worthy of that prize. If you make no attempt to follow the commands of Jesus, then you do not understand the gospel, and therefore you do not have salvation. Thus, we need to make every effort we can to show that we are followers of Jesus, that our faith is genuine, not just a thought in our head, but a deed in our actions. Jesus gave roughly 50 commands for us to follow, but they can be summed up in 2 commands. Everything else is just fleshing those 2 commands out. We are to love God and we are to love others. This is not a new concept, guys. This is something that was given to the prophet Micah back in his day. And it's something I'm going to close with because I think it's a text that is so powerful and so simple. And you've seen it on probably at least a dozen different church signs before in the past. So I'm going to close out just reading this text. And I want you to then go read it and spend some time dwelling on it. O man, what is good? And what does the Lord require of you? But to do justice, and to love kindness, and to walk humbly